Okay, on the next feature now, we have Claire Horton. She is a CBE and Chief Executive to Battersea. Welcome to today's edition of the show, where we're discussing an impending issue to do with animal welfare crisis for lockdown, maybe quarantine pets as well.
Hi Danny, nice to see you.
And I just wanted to ask a little bit of a background about Battersea before we begin. You always see it when you're kind of travelling into Victoria Station, London, but it has quite a history to it.
Does certainly. Well, we're 160 years old this year, believe it or not. Started in a stable yard in Holloway by a lady called Mary Tealby, a bit of a pioneer of her day back in 1860. Yeah. And 3.5 million animals later, here we are.
Yep, doing a great job. And how many centres have you got around the country now?
Well, we've got 3 centres, one in Windsor, one in Brands Hatch, Kent, and of course the big iconic centre that everybody I'm sure knows of in London. But we have a national presence in that we work across the British Isles. In fact, we work internationally with rescue organisations all the way around the world, and we've got a very loud voice and quite a serious a voice for animal welfare. So of course we're well known in those areas where we're looking to change the law and sort of the public messaging side of things. So we punch above our weight, so to speak.
Thank you for telling the listener a little bit more about the organisation. And on today's talking point, we are seeing an increase of people buying pets to maybe alleviate loneliness, especially during this lockdown. People are living by themselves, and buying a household pet or an animal is quite a commitment. And with the impounding the coronavirus has had on businesses around the world, are we also seeing charitable organisations, especially animal resources and centres, taking the punch as well?
Absolutely. And I mean, coronavirus has been a really difficult time, obviously, for everybody around the world, not just in this country, and certainly not just in animal welfare. But I think animals have been those sort of hidden victims, in the sense that, you know, they don't really take centre stage. And I guess, you know, in the grand scheme of things, of course, you wouldn't expect that. But behind the scenes, there are hundreds, thousands of animals abandoned and sort of abused and neglected almost on a weekly basis. And we just don't see that these days, of course, because the news is much more about coronavirus and people. But animals have played a real part during this particular crisis, in the sense that so many people end up very suddenly having to work from home. National lockdown arrived. There was a absolute huge surge in people wanting to get a pet for lockdown, particularly dogs and cats. And that's great, because you're right, animals are wonderful for companions, and just getting you fed, getting you out there, just giving you company if you're lonely, if you're on your own. There's nothing nicer than having a pet that will be your friend and your companion. But what we did see was a huge surge of people who were suddenly working from home. Animals may be already in the home, starting to behave a little bit differently, getting a bit more needy perhaps, because of course all of a sudden perhaps they were used to people going to work, coming back at certain times. Now everybody's there all day, every day. And whilst they might have got lots more attention, there is a potential that as people go back to work, that those animals might get a bit disruptive or get a bit lost. So there's that sort of element. The other side of that is, of course, rescue centres themselves, where lots of animals end up, had to shut down almost overnight, like everybody else, like every other business. And it took us several weeks before we were able to put in place sort of emergency measures. So we were able to rehome animals virtually or by delivery. We were rehoming people, who were being interviewed on Zoom, and quickly we got up and running again. but we lost so much income. And this is rescues across the country. So there are around 1,000 rescues and rehoming organisations across the British Isles. And almost every single one of them has been impacted negatively. So loss of income, loss of fundraising, closure of shops, inability to have so many staff or volunteers on site, and all of that really impacted. And I guess we've got some questions and some concerns about what might happen in the future. As people start to go back to work, although lots of people I think will still be able to keep their animals because they'll maybe stay on a sort of flexible working basis, so working from home some of the week. But if people lose their jobs, lose their homes, all of that stuff that recession brings is likely to impact on an already stretched and really struggling animal sector.
Thank you for expanding on that question. Very, very helpful to the listener. And I just wanted to relay some statistics from a report, obviously the report we're talking about today. There's been a big drop of 50% of income on charitable organisations. And you did mention stray dogs. United Kingdom, UK is likely to see up to 27 more stray dogs across the next 5 years.
Yes. I think this is typical of what you would expect after a recession. And we are predicting, this is the Battersea report that's launched today about the impact of COVID on rescue centres, on animals, in particular companion animals. And we are expecting to see over the next 5 years a rise of about 27% in the number of stray dogs that are being put out onto the streets. Now, what we would say in that is, anybody who doesn't want their animal, because these animals are owned, they're not just born in the wild and then turn up on a street corner. These are owned by people, and lots of people for all sorts of reasons, very, very genuine and serious reasons, very often can't keep their animals. And so rescue centres don't judge people and are always asking, please don't trade your animal online, please take it to a rescue centre, because at least you can be sure that a rescue centre will give it all its medical care and find it a really good home that suits that particular animal. And I guess that's one of the challenges that we've seen in the last few months, is really a concern about how many people have been buying their animals online, and the ridiculously inflated prices that breeders and importers of puppies that have been bred at speed overseas have been charging, and the welfare standards of these animals, the health standards. Many of them are very sick, many of them are underage, and many of them are dying in people's homes. And of course, that's heartbreaking for everybody.
Sure. And there's an old analogy, like a dog is not just for Christmas, it's for life, in a sense. The upkeep, maintenance of it can be expensive, especially veterinary treatments as well. And speaking of veterinary consultations, are reported to be down on average a third, even as late as earlier this month.
Yeah, they are. I mean, over lockdown, one of the biggest challenges for even veterinary surgeries, like doctors, like dentists, like all businesses, they had to find safe ways to work. So for quite a number of months, vet consultations were only for emergencies only. So things like your routine vaccinations or your microchips or, your general teeth and health welfare checkups had all been put on hold. So, a very significant reduction in those veterinary consultations. And I think what that potentially does is knock on to the health of the animals who are missing out on the care. It also knocks on to things like microchipping of dogs. So when you get a new puppy, or you change ownership of an animal, a dog, it should be microchipped. And if breeders aren't microchipping, and they should be, there's no reason that they can't, if they're not using vets to do that, then of course people are buying animals that are not traceable or accountable back to the breeders. And of course, what you'll start seeing is there is concerns that animal health may deteriorate in the years to come because these early consultations for earlier problems hadn't been able to be fulfilled.
Well explained there. And just wrapping up the interview now, if people would like to make a donation to your organisation, they can do by different methods. And could you just tell the listener how they could help the Battersea this year? I suppose if they didn't want to make a donation, other ways they can help with getting involved with your organisation.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, yes, I mean, Battersea, like all charities, has taken a big hit, and particularly animal charities. So if people would like to make a Christmas donation, we'd be delighted to receive that, and that's at battersea.org.uk. Otherwise, if people are, want to donate to their local rescues, then please do that as well. There's rescues all over the country, and Battersea is one of them. So please make your choices and support your charity accordingly. But do look after animals this Christmas.
Great. Thank you, Claire Horton, feature on today's syndicated show, where we're discussing the impending issue to do with animal welfare crisis for lockdown pets. It's been nice to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Harry. That was brilliant. Really, thank you very much indeed for doing that.